I was going to sing a song to start this, but I backed off at the last second.
What was
Matt
the
Parrino
song?
here, Ryan Talbot. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. Bill's training camp is over. I love a
Nailed
little
it.
Frank Sinatra, man. Like getting
Nailed it.
the people going. Why not? I had a little stage fright as we started. I did a little Google search to see if I had the words right. It was a whole thing. Welcome into the Shout Podcast, training camp. We're always a little loopy at the end. We thought, why not start it in a fun way? He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. How are you, buddy?
I am doing great. I can't carry a tune like that, though. I mean, you're very talented at what you do, but maybe a career in theater was missed here, Mr. Parrino. That was pretty solid. I'm not going to lie.
So did you know that I was in show choir in high school?
I think you did mention that
Did
to
I
me
tell you that
before.
before? Yeah.
I think we've been on a few road trips where you start singing and you were telling me about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's your favorite part. And we're doing it next week. Ryan
Week.
Talbot and Matt Parrino. Listen,
Pittsburgh.
here's the thing. Training camp is great to be an insider, without a doubt. But there's no better time to become a Shout Buffalo Bills insider than when Ryan Talbot and Matt Parrino are road tripping to Pittsburgh next week, because you're going to get all of it. You're going to get all the pieces of the trip as we head off to Pittsburgh for Bills Steelers joint practice and Bills Steelers preseason game.
I cannot wait for that. Yeah, we had a fun road trip last year during the regular season to the Commanders game, and probably hit up some of the same sites or, some areas close by. We went through a lot of Pennsylvania on that trip, so can't wait.
All right, so we got a lot to get to in today's show. At the start, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. We're going to get you through. It was a very light practice today, so a lot of what we're going to be talking about on today's show, outside of like what actually happened in practice, because I don't think there was a lot to glean from it. It was kind of 75%. You saw a highlight the Bills put out of KJ Hamler or of Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We'll get to him in a minute. It didn't look like Christian Benford was really trying that hard to defend the pass. So we don't want to overreact to anything that happened today, but some things like depth chart wise and what we're expecting to see. And I think that's the best place to start, Ryan, is Sean McDermott was asked about who's going to play on Saturday against the Chicago Bears. And we are getting Josh Allen and the Bills starters against number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. I'm excited from a viewing perspective to get a chance to see the Bills defense, which, oh, by the way, Bobby Babich is calling, and we'll get to that in a minute as well, against the rookie and Caleb Williams. And, we could sit here and talk about whether or not it's a good idea to play Josh Allen, but the big storyline of training camp has been all these new pieces. And Sean McDermott has been spending most of his time around the quarterback, around the receivers. I think Josh Allen and company playing a quarter is about getting them some reps in the real live game action, where, the bullets are flying, if you will. And it's a dangerous scenario whenever you're putting out your $50 million quarterback in a preseason game, a game that doesn't count. But I think it's one where the Bills are weighing the pros and the cons, and, they have some work that they feel they have to do.
Yeah, I personally hate it. If we're going to be perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of doing this. And, I think part of it is the reps, like you mentioned. I wonder how much of it is the center to quarterback snaps, getting some live reps there against another team, seeing how it goes in an actual game. We saw some low snaps at training camp. We did see some issues there. I don't see the upside in having Josh Allen out there. Now, does it benefit some of the players trying to make this team? 100%. If, for instance, you get Tyrell Shavers an opportunity with the first team and Josh Allen at some point in that first quarter, that could loom large for him. I'm not necessarily anticipating that. I'm sure certain players are going to have a certain amount of reps in the game. Maybe you're going to be really light on the reps to the tight ends. Maybe that gives you a chance to evaluate the competition between Davidson and Quentin Morris. But I'm in terms of Josh Allen himself, having him out there in a live game action, I don't like it in the preseason. You know what you have in him. I get that this is Joe Brady's true system, but they've been running it all camp. Allen is very good at running just about any system that he's asked to. So from my perspective, was not a huge fan of that decision.
I totally get it. And honestly, most of the time, I'm right there with you. But I do think that in the way this offense is going to play the quarter, and listen, anything can happen. And if he gets hurt, we're going to be having a completely different conversation after that game. So I get that part. But I do think there's value in, for Keon Coleman going through live game reps before the first game against the Cardinals with Josh Allen in a game setting. Like, I think there's value there. He's going to play 2 quarters next week or close to that, and he could get hurt in that game. And so I think, like, the idea here is maybe he plays a quarter here, then you get a quarter into the Steelers game, and then things are going well. Maybe they have a touchdown drive, and then you pull the reins back and you say, we're done right here. I think that there's a certain amount of snaps that going into training camp, they figured out that they wanted to see the starters for in preseason. And so whether that happens against the Bears or it all happens against the Steelers, I think that they're going to follow their plan that they probably had before the season comes out. But I get it. If he gets hurt, it's going to be bad. And they'll face this every single year. And it's going to get worse as we go along. The older that he gets and the tougher it is to sustain the way that he plays. And I shouldn't say sustain the way that it plays, but, the more like banged up you can get and the tougher it is to come back from injury, all those kind of little pieces, this conversation will change over the years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting in week 1. And, shifting gears here completely, Matt, because you're going to have Josh Allen who's playing some snaps during the preseason. We know he's playing in this first preseason game. We'll see about the rest versus Kyler Murray, who's not playing at all during the preseason. It's going to be 2 quarterbacks, completely different, tune-ups to the regular season, as well as the wide receivers. You mentioned it, Keon Coleman, the importance of giving him some live reps in a game. Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going to get those reps with Kyler Murray in the preseason. So, maybe after week 1, if the game goes Buffalo's way in a convincing fashion, maybe we sit there and say, okay, that's why you kind of get those guys out there. That being said, I've seen it both ways. I've seen teams not play a quarterback. They come out and they look good in the regular season. I've seen teams do the opposite and they start out slow. I don't think there's necessarily a rhyme or reason to why teams start slow in the regular season or start hot. But the Bills, like you said, probably went into training camp before the start of it and probably said, we're going to get Josh Allen out there throughout the preseason. Here's what we want to do, because there are so many new faces in the wide receiver room that, there's barely anyone that was catching meaningful passes from him on this team from 1 year ago in the wide receiver room specifically. So I do get it. I'm just not personally a fan.
Thank you so much for watching on this Thursday afternoon. The Bills wrapped up their final training camp practice here at St. John Fisher University. And Sean McDermott made a great point today during his press availability. Training camp now shifts to Buffalo. Like, this isn't the end of training camp. It's just the end of the practices in Fisher, the part where, they come together as a team, all the team building, the chemistry, all those kinds of things. But the practices will still be pretty open. We'll get a chance to watch them for the next, I think, week through the Pittsburgh game. So don't go anywhere. We're still going to have these daily observation shows from practice when it is open to the media. And so we'll bring you all of that. I want to get to Marquez Valdez-Scantling because we've kind of hovered around this topic quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And there are 2 definitive camps that are forming around MVS. There's the group that says, it doesn't matter what happens in training camp. He's going to make the roster, the guaranteed money, the relationship with Josh Allen that's kind of been forming here. And, he has looked more comfortable as we've gone along over the course of of training camp. There's another camp that says, all right, number 1, love Tyrell Shavers. Sean McDermott made a point today again to specifically mention Tyrell Shavers when he was asked about people that have maybe exceeded expectations in training camp and the consistency that Shavers is bringing. He's having a legitimate training camp. He's making a legitimate run at a roster spot. And maybe, Ryan, we haven't talked enough about, maybe he's making a run at a spot. And I want to highlight MVS today. He made a nice catch. The Bills were going about 75% speed. It looked like Benford kind of, veered off. And this is a Christian Benford that's been absolutely locked down with the pads on, throughout the practice weeks. Right. So I'm not taking too much away from it. But then there's another play, a couple plays later, where he's wide open. The only guy that's there is Terrell Bernard, and he harasses him slightly. I mean, maybe kind of puts a hand on his pad or something like that. He dropped the ball. And Pops Mafia, who's been at all the practices, our good buddy here on YouTube, he made the comment yesterday about the drops yesterday from MVS, and this continues to be a storyline. There's been drops from some people. James Cook, we've talked a lot about that, but MVS, the drops, that's one of the reasons why I don't think he's in Kansas City anymore. One last thing before I turn it over to you. I will push back against folks, and I saw it in the chat yesterday when we were talking about MVS, who say the Chiefs didn't want him anymore. And, he got cut because, of all these bad plays, on and on and on. The Chiefs got rid of him because he was on a 3-year, $30 million deal. He was going to count $11 million on their salary cap this year, and he's not an $11 million wide receiver at this stage in his career. Maybe he never was. But Either way, he's not going to be that guy in this offense. He's going to be more of that, stash in case of emergency. I think it's going to be Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir that are going to eat first in this offense. Then you have Mac Hollins, and then I think you have MVS. And I don't know if Tyrell Shavers can get above that MVS tier if he does make the 53. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that as high as he can get in the tier is on par with MVS. And that's very limited reps in a live actual game, because you mentioned it. This is going to be a 3-man show at the top of the depth chart between Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel. You're going to want Mac Hollins to get some reps because of his blocking ability, and he can catch the ball down the field. I really think that the MVS snaps, if he makes this roster, which I anticipate he is, I'm in that he has some guaranteed money. You had Josh Allen coming to his defense talking about he was the latest signing in the wide receiver room in terms of he's had the least amount of time with Allen in this offense. Everything, in my opinion, points to him making this roster. But I could see the way that McDermott talked today about this team being very serious about carrying 6 wide receivers, and the 6th being Tyrell Shavers. So, that's a separate discussion, because there has been some talk about the Bills only keeping 5. I think that you really do have to make that push for 6 now, based on the way that Shavers has looked this summer. And, the good thing about Shavers and a young player like this is you could bring him onto your initial 53-man roster, Matt. And if, the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season, he's not doing much, you could expose him to waivers, risk losing him. But at that point, I think a lot of teams already have their own guys, their own players in the system, and you might be able to sneak them back onto the practice squad then. So the Bills might even just kind of be thinking about it that way of, who do we want to get on this initial roster, try to get them some live game action if possible. But if it doesn't work out, we could also try to release them, get them on our practice squad, and then adjust our roster accordingly. So those are some things to watch. But MVS is a guy that I think makes this roster. But kudos to Tyrell Shavers for all that he's done, and the fact that the Bills might have to go with 6 wide receivers to start the year.
Who are some teams maybe that you could think of out there that if the Bills do risk Shavers could potentially make a run at him? Because the more you dig into him, I see the Bills pro personnel guys out at practice every single day. They're watching their own practice. They're probably, talking with people around the league about, what's happening in other practices as other, front office folks are traveling to watch some of these, preseason games once they get into the games. If Shavers performs, I mean, there's going to be – everybody's always looking to add wide receivers. You look at some of these teams that – I think of teams like the Carolina Panthers or maybe the Los Angeles Chargers, who are a team that maybe they're only 3 deep now with the moves that they've made. That Joe Shane was a part of this regime, and John Roberts mentioned the Giants here, that I think was part of the regime that signed Tyrell Shavers as a UDFA a couple of years ago, or maybe he had already been gone, but he was a part of the scouting process during that year. So somebody that they may have tabbed. So who are some teams that you think could make a run at? I don't think Shavers makes it back to the practice squad if they cut him.
You mean like at the initial cut down, not like
yes.
Okay. Yeah, you look at the teams that are at the bottom of the league. I mean, even the Patriots. Look at the Patriots. They drafted 2 young guys. They are a team, though, that was also trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk. So they're always looking to add to that room. And Ayuk obviously is in a league by himself compared to the guys that we're talking about, the rookies that they drafted and Tyrell Shavers. But teams that are at the bottom of the league, a lot of the times, why wouldn't you bring in Tyrell Shavers to compete for your wide receiver 4 type of job? The Giants make perfect sense with Joe Shane. Just trying to think across the league. I mean, If you look at the Tennessee Titans, they've had some injuries with Hopkins. He's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks is what I read. They might be looking for some young wide receiver help or some options at cut down day. That's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a lot of teams that I'm missing that could be in the mix. Washington with the Commanders, they're another team that could look there. So the list goes on and on. There's plenty of teams that will be looking for young talent, and the camp that he's had, I agree with you. He will get claimed if he's let go at the end of the summer.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just jumping in now, you missed me serenading all of our viewers early in the show with a little Frank Sinatra. So please don't go back and listen to it. We're going to Pittsburgh next week, Ryan. It's going to be a joint practice against the Steelers, a preseason game on Saturday, and we're going to bring every part of our trip together in the car. Ryan Talbot and Matt Parrino. I almost called you Ryan Parrino. In the front seat of the car, we are going to bring it to the insiders. And you can become an insider by texting 716-528-6727 or go to joinsubtext.com/shoutbuffalobills. Put in your phone number and it'll take you through the rest of the details. $3.99 a month, very small investment, and you get access to Ryan and myself 365, 24/7. And the insider text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Beyer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com.
It's going to be a fun trip. And like Matt said, the insiders are going to get a lot of live messages from us on our journey to Pittsburgh. Obviously, when we're there, the joint practice will have you covered, and that preseason game as well.
All right, so next up, let's go to Bobby Babich, who, I put a website or a story up on our website talking about Sean McDermott's reasoning behind why Bobby Babich is going to call the plays this Saturday against the Bears, and also the approach that he's taken to Bobby Babich taking over as defensive coordinator, because that's a kind of like a delicate balance. A guy that's been the guy calling the defense. He's always had his hand heavily in the defense since Bobby's been here. They obviously have a close relationship, but he's taken a step back and spent most of his time during training camp with the offense to give Bob Babich some space to make the defense his own. There's been a ton of call-it periods where he's had a chance to have the headset and to communicate with Terrell Bernard, who has been, outspoken about the fact that sometimes he's got to tell Bobby, like, you're talking too much. Like, you're too much in my head while I'm out there. But he's excited. He's chomping at the bit. He's asked Sean McDermott for every chance that he can get to practice, to call it in, the practice environment. It's going to be different in the game. I thought one person brought up a really interesting point on social media, was like, okay, Bobby Babich is going to call the defense, but how vanilla is the game plan? He talked about there is no game plan. Joe Brady mentioned that when getting ready for the preseason. So there's a couple like caveats to this, but John Butler did it last year for the Bills in a preseason game. Sean McDermott took the play calling duties back after that and did it for the regular season. This is a huge moment audition for Bobby Babich.
Yeah, and like you said, the game plan is going to be very vanilla. That's what it always is in the preseason. The coordinators have mentioned that. But he can still kind of tinker with his lineup, some blitzing, do some things just to test out how his personnel handles it. It is going to be a good experience for him. It's going to be his first action as the defensive coordinator up in the booth, I would assume, because he said he's going to do that in the regular season. So I would assume in the preseason as well. I like the booth part, by the way. It gives you, a different view of it rather than on the sidelines. So it's going to be fun because you're going against a very talented quarterback in Caleb Williams. They have a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. How does the team hold up against this unit? A young Bears team that's trying to make a lot of noise here right out of the gate in 2024.
All right, we talked a little bit about the defensive coordinator situation and what the plan is there. Let's get to the injury situation for the Bills, because that's something that I got to be honest with you, Ryan, like the laundry list is concerning. There's a bunch of storylines littered within it. For me, the biggest concerning point right now is Daquan Jones, who missed his third straight day with a groin injury. And the severity of that I mean, it's anybody's guess. The Bills list him as day to day, so that's good news. If it was week to week, that would be a little bit more of a concern, maybe a partial tear or something like that. Maybe this is just a little bit of a tweak and they're being really careful with it. But my expectation is that Daquan Jones doesn't play at all in the preseason. And, we know groin injuries, right? In the NFL, they tend to linger. So whenever he gets a chance to come back, 4 or 5 weeks here till the opener, they're probably going to be super careful with that. I want that to feel as close to normal as possible before he goes out there. And now we're kind of looking at, okay, this could mean a bigger role for Austin Johnson, who they signed over from the Chargers. He's been the guy that stepped into that one technique role in practice the last couple of days with Daquan Jones out.
It's huge for Austin Johnson in terms of the opportunity, in terms of what he might have to do early in the regular season, depending on the severity of this injury. Groin and hamstring injuries are nagging injuries in this league. You recover from them, you come back. It seems very easy to re-aggravate or have something happen again. So, yeah, if you're Buffalo, you are erring on the side of caution. You are slow playing this. I wouldn't put Daquan Jones out there at all this preseason. Let him rehab it. Let him work on, getting back in time for week 1. But it's a concern in the back of your mind that it could happen again, because those are just those injuries that bother players over the course of a year. Jones is a defensive tackle, a lot of body weight on the body. It's not like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where you worry too about the position he plays, the grind on that he's going to take on a play-by-play basis. It's not at least like the pec injury, but it's something that you worry about him re-aggravating throughout the course of the year.
In the comments, John Robert mentions Dwayne Carter. Obviously, his main role is behind Ed Oliver. So he's already seen more snaps. Carter has been having, he's another guy I wanted to talk about here as somebody that I think has really come on in the last week. I asked Sean McDermott about him this morning, and I said, this is a guy that seemed like he's had a really good training camp. And he said, actually, and I was actually surprised with how forthcoming Sean was about this, because you know how he is with rookies, how he usually talks about them. He said it was a tough go at the beginning for Dwayne Carter, and something that, a lot of reps, a lot of experience early on where it wasn't maybe going his way. And then all of a sudden you started to see flashes, and he's starting to kind of charge up the depth chart. So I asked Dwayne Carter about that today. I'm going to play what he said about why maybe the lights has been turned on over the last couple of days.
There you go.
I have one question. Ranch or blue cheese?
Sorry. That was a little, he was spending a little time with a fan, and I thought the fan was walking away, and I started the interview, and the fan came back to get it because he forgot his autograph. So sorry about that. That was a little bit of
your voice really changed.
All right, Ryan. Really?
When they watch practice back, you're seeing the flashes from you.
Like, how is the light coming on?
Yeah, it's just repetition, right? You can't replace experience with anything but, repetition. And so for me, it was all about getting these reps and competition reps, taking individuals seriously and taking the coaching, accepting coaching, and, trying to get my feet underneath me and, start to become the player that I'm supposed to be in this league.
Trying to become the player that I'm supposed to be in this league. And that was the piece that I wanted to really zero in on, because
mentality.
Sean McDermott did not shy away from saying, he's our third defensive tackle. There is a third or fourth, I think he said. They're going to have serious expectations for him. And I think the light coming on late in training camp like this, huge for Carter.
Yeah, huge for Carter. He's going to play a big situational role on this defensive line at defensive tackle. The flashes have become more apparent. I like that, he already has in his mind he's supposed to be a very important piece of this puzzle, and those flashes have helped him along the way here late in training camp. So I'm really excited to see a lot of the young guys on Saturday throughout the preseason, Carter being one of them, a lot of guys in this rookie class specifically. So he's going to get a nice opportunity because, again, Ed Oliver, he'll play a little bit with the starters and things like that, but this is going to be a lot of opportunity for Carter and company.
Steph Poirier says, good morning. Must be over on the West Coast,
Yes.
or maybe overseas. So good morning. Welcome into the live show here. A couple people asking about Mac Jones. Let's get into him.
Mac
Jones. Where's Mac Jones these days?
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville's backing up Trevor Lawrence. What a career arc.
Yeah.
All right, Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins, leg injury is something that he's dealing with. I'm wondering if I'm not as concerned about that. I think that might be something that popped up after yesterday, and he's already had his work over these 2 weeks, and I think they're going to just dial him back till he feels 100%, is my guess. We'll see how that kind of plays out over the next couple of days. KJ Hamler was being evaluated during Sean McDermott's availability this morning. He did not participate in practice. So whatever is going on with Hamler, and I could put in, see if I can do a little work here to figure out what he's dealing with. But, that's a tough situation for Hamler, who's had a really nice couple of days here. And now he's not going to be able to play in the first preseason game. That's a hit because Sean McDermott was talking about it's tough to evaluate guys when they're not out there.
Yeah, it's concerning because the initial depth chart comes out, and yes, unofficial, made by the PR staff, but you see him listed behind Khalil Shakir in the wide receiver room. You see him listed as the primary kick return, punt returner of this team. That was his road to opportunity, his way to make this roster is over those 3 preseason games, make a few splash plays for this team. And if you were able to do that, I thought maybe you could make a case for him making this roster. If he's missing one preseason game, that's going to hurt his chances significantly, in my opinion. There's still going to be at least 2 more opportunities that follow, but the injury, whatever he's dealing with, you'd like to think it's minor if he was being evaluated first thing in the morning in terms of trying to give it a go. But we've seen a lot of these injuries that we thought might be minor that were listed as day-to-day, where these players have missed a significant time at camp.
Sean McDermott basically ruled out all of the injured players. So you're thinking about Ty Johnson, Chase Claypool, Justin Shorter, Travis Clayton, Ediofan Ulofoshio, Nicholas Morrow, Cole Bishop, and Mike Edwards. And now adding on Mac Hollins, potentially KJ Hamler, Daquan Jones to that list. And, it's a lot of players in there, a lot of players that are fighting for roster spot. I mean, Ulofoshio is a guy that you want to get him out there. You want to see what it looks like. If you're going to give him a spot. Another thing Sean McDermott talked about is he was asked about a specific package pass rusher and if he'd consider adding that kind of player to the roster. And he's like, sure, there'd be a place for it, but how many specialists can you add to your roster who maybe don't contribute in special teams? And that's the area that I'm going to be looking for the most on Saturday when it comes to Zach Davidson. How much is he playing on special teams in all 4 phases? Is he somebody that excels in that area? I almost feel like for Davidson, the special teams work is even more important than the offensive work in the preseason.
I agree with that because you already know what he can contribute in the passing game as a receiver, as a big target at tight end for Josh Allen and company. He's done a nice job there. He needs to come out though on special teams and make some plays, stand out, make sure that he does his 1/11th as part of that unit, because if he can stand out in special teams, that furthers his case where you could maybe leapfrog him potentially over a Quentin Morris. So while you listed a laundry list of players, Matt, that are going to miss some time and not play in this game on Saturday, there's a lot of young players who are going to get a ton of reps, which helps them in their case of trying to make the roster. You look at the initial depth chart, you have Richard Garage and you have Tylen Grable as 2 guys who might be fighting for 1 tackle spot. They could see a lot of reps. You're talking about guys on special teams, priority practice squad guys that can stand out over these next 3 games and maybe find themselves as a lock to make Buffalo's practice squad. So opportunities are going to be there for a lot of Bills players where maybe had they been healthier going into this game, some guys wouldn't have seen enough reps to even make a case for themselves. So that, I guess, is the positive side of all of this.
A lot of questions in the comments asking about Deion Dawkins. He did return to practice today. So he was excused for a personal injury or a personal matter. He returned to practice today. So that is, I think, in the rear view. We did talk a little bit about Mac Hollins. He's dealing with a leg injury. Didn't practice today. Not expected to play on Saturday against the Bears. Justin asks here, this is a good question. Does anyone know the details on the Marquez Valdez-Scantling contract? Will he really get paid if he's not on the team? And the details there are, yes, he will get paid if he gets cut. He got almost a fully guaranteed contract from the Bills. He signed a, let me bring it up here, 1 year, $2.25 million contract, and the guaranteed at signing is $2.25 million, Ryan. So if the Bills cut him, he will get all of that money.
Yeah, all of it goes into his pocket or bank account. So yes, I mean, it benefits him either way. It was a good contract for a player that was sitting on the market for a long time, looking for a place to play this season. You know, you're not breaking the bank, but you're making every single cent of the deal. So it works out very well for him. Is the game going to be on TV? Yes, locally it's on, and then nationally, is this one on NFL Network? I feel like
I did hear somebody say it was NFL Network. Yep, and Charles says on
I feel like it is. So, yes, you will be able to watch this one. And if you can't make it to the stadium, or if you live outside of Buffalo, enjoy it. We'll be there up in the press box covering it. Cannot wait to get back up there and watch an actual football game, even if it is preseason.
Yeah, and the other thing too is there's 4 void years on Valdez-Scantling's contract. So it's like $900,000 in 25, $225,000 3 years after that. I mean, I don't know how much that would affect whether or not you cut him, because the void years are there whether you cut him or not. To me, it's like it's the Tyrell Shavers watch, right? Or the Chase Claypool watch. And I think we're at the point with Claypool where you can get him on the practice squad. So I don't think that that's fine. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, buddy?
No, final thoughts. Bills fans, we will be back on Saturday afternoon / evening once the Bills and the Bears have finished their game. So stay locked in there. If you are a Shout insider, be prepared over these next few weeks. There's still going to be a lot coming your way, from the preseason all the way to roster cutdown day.
All right, for Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Parrino. I'm not going to send us off in song, but you never know when you get a little bit of a serenade here on the Shout Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. Take care, everybody, from St. John Fisher University, wrapping up another awesome Buffalo Bills training camp. We will see you on Saturday. Take care, everybody.